Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to Covenant Calendar. We got a calendar study in its purest form for you tonight, and it's called Mosheh's Wisdom and Yahuah's Tequfah. I was asked, how come Mosheh's Wisdom? What's that about? And some of you don't know what a Tequfah is. So very quickly and simply, Tequfah is the path in the atmosphere that the sun tracks around and around to keep us warm. It's a 360 degree track. It was originally 360 days, but today, as of 700 BC, it is now 365 and a few decimal points. What is Moshe's wisdom? If we look at this verse here, Acts 7, verse 22, let's read it here. And Moshe was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and in deeds. I thought the Egyptians, the Mitzrites, were all about evil. Isn't that what we have been taught? Oh, if it's Egyptian, it's evil. Well, why is it then that Yahuah specifically had Moshe trained in Mitzrayim to be the future Pharaoh? His education was second to none. Well, if you look at that pyramid on the lower left, you'll see it's a bird's eye view of the pyramid. And there's two dark sides, two lighter sides where the sun is shining. But if you look on the one side in view, you will see there's a line down the face from the top of the pyramid to the bottom. When you see that line, you'll understand that there's two different angles on that one wall. That means that all four walls, with the two angles on each, there's actually 8 different angles of that pyramid. Way back when, there was there was 3 pyramids, 3 small ones, situated beside one of those pyramids, and the Tequfah, I should say, the shadow, which is called Teshuvah, was tracked by those 3 small pyramids. They would throw a shadow of different forms because of what day it was onto the big pyramid. And they could determine with an exact precision that is astounding to architects today. They could tell you the days before the equinox and the days after the equinox, and most specifically, the day of the equinox. Now, if you look at the Malapin tablets from Egypt or Mitzrayim, there's information on those Malapin tablets that identify the heliacal rising of certain stars. What is the heliacal rising? And I might have slaughtered that word, I don't know. The heliacal rising is that when they see specific stars that have been gone out of sight, when they see them once again, that means the Mazzaroth is in a different position depending on the time of year, and those stars become visible again. That documentation over the years in Egypt identifies specific stars sighted on a specific date. That documentation makes it ultra clear of a 360-day year identified by the equinox. That's the only possible way that this documentation can be formulated. A lunar calendar does not come anywhere near close. So there's more proof of this, and it's a 360-day calendar at that point. When you see the little icon that designates degrees, that it's that little tiny circle, you'll see a number, and then at the end of it, just above it, you'll see a little tiny circle. It's called an icon. Originally, that little icon symbolized the sun and the days of the year. So this is where we get our 360 degrees from. There was originally 360 days in the year, and that is identified by the 360 degrees in a circle. This is where the degrees came from. Yahuah planted it onto this earth, and he says, well, I'll just let man discover that. He'll think he knows something. When all along, it was seeded from Sion, from heaven, a 360-degree circle. What's interesting about that? Because to find the circumference of a circle, you need to have pi. What's pi? Well, I'm not a mathematician, but I do know that it's 3.14. If you go up on the internet, you can search it out. I just found a quote a little while ago where pi was taken to what it says as several trillion decimal points. And that's where the computer stopped. So for in our understanding, pi is eternity. Now, this is what Yahuah placed onto this earth, eternity, literally. When you understand the word shane, which is the Hebrew word for year, you find that in Genesis 1 to 14. That word shane means to do a second time, to repeat. Now, when you have something that repeats time and time and time and time and time again, and it has an eternal application, as in 3.14, that's eternity. So what did Yahuah seed onto this earth? Eternity existed. And Yahuah took this earth and he inserted it into eternity. And he gave us what we understand as shane. That's his type of year so that we can understand his appointments. So this is what Mosheh learned in Egypt or in Mitzrayim. That's why on the right-hand side, you see a picture of the sun, you see a picture of the pyramid. Notice the Sphinx in front of it. On the day of the equinox, if you stood at the tail of the Sphinx, the sun would rise directly at the center of the head of the Sphinx on the day of the equinox. That Sphinx was built for a reason. It's just not an object, something to look at, something to bring tourists money. No, that is specifically there to identify, or one of the reasons, to identify the day of the Teshuvah. Now, you're going to hear some words in here. You've already heard them. Tequfah. I've told you what the Tequfah is. It's the circuit of the sun. It's the 365-day circuit today. The Teshuvah, that word is a turning. We normally hear that when people turn their lives around 180 degrees and 180 degrees. There's eternity in there also, 3.14. But anyhow, when they turn their lives around to Yahusha and they reject their past and they go on a direct line to be in a good relationship with Yahusha, they have teshuvah in their lives. What about teshuvah on time? A teshuvah, and you're going to see this towards the end of the study, is identified in Greek in James 1 verse 17 as trope. It identifies the point where these celestial bodies have completed their yearly circuit and they embark on a new circuit. So the teshuvah is the final day of the year or final cycle of the year. You're going to hear me say cycles quite a bit. And cycles change. Cycles are a 24-hour period. And my remote's not working. Just give me a second here. There we go. So you will hear me talk about these terms quite a bit. A cycle represents a 24-hour period. Actually we're going to come to that slide, and so I'll just continue here. This is a study from Yah's covenant calendar. The date is around 1490 BC. I want you to notice here, for those who are new to these studies, and you new ones, please ask questions. Take your pencil, paper, write down the slide number. You'll see the bottom right-hand corner. Jot down your questions and ask me at the end of the presentation. The word cycle is used to designate one 24-hour period, that is dawn to dawn. Why dawn to dawn? Because that's what's written in Genesis 1 and all throughout Scripture. And it's dawn to dawn within a week of 7. There are 7 24-hour cycles in a week. The word day causes too much confusion within its ambiguous inaccuracy. For an example here, is day the light season? Or is it the night season? Or does it reference both? It's too easy to bring into confusion. So to eliminate that confusion, when I say light season, that identifies the covenant of the light. That's light, of course. And then there's the night season. That's the covenant of the night season, where it's Leil, that's the darkness. Very, very simple. But when I say cycle, that represents a 24-hour period. So let's move on here. Equinox. There's that word Teshuvah. The Teshuvah is the final cycle of the year. And then I ask the question, is it the first or it's the last? Well, Mosheh will tell you, he will show you that it's the last cycle of the year, but that's going to come later on. Is the Teshuvah, the equinox, is it the first cycle of the year? What does Mosheh reveal? We're also going to look at what does the lunar calendar reveal about its own count? What can we learn from the cloud? No, that's not the internet. This is Yahuah's cloud. This is the cloud that protected the Israelites through their journey, protected them from the heat of the desert and it turned into a fire by night when they were going across the Red Sea. It kept the Mitzrites from attacking them. Back to this study. In the wilderness, on the first cycle, on the first month, on the second year, that would be Mosheh, they did what? What was he commanded to do? In Exodus 40, you will read he was commanded to do something very, very specific on the first cycle of the first month of the second year in the wilderness. It's very accurate what he did. So the question is, what date is the vernal Teshuvah or the equinox? Is it the first day of the year or is it the last? Let's look at Yahuah's light. You are children of the light. And ultimately, what did Mosheh reveal through the blood-ratified Melchizedek covenant? Because this is the calendar based on the Melchizedek covenant that was blood-ratified at Mount Sinai. I hope you like this picture. It's Yahuah's light. It's a picture of dawn. On the next slide, you're going to see the first month of the Exodus 12 in a normal format. When you look on your wall, you see your calendar, that's what you're going to look at. This information will be used to introduce a different format in the remainder of this study. And after that, the linear style of calendar format is used to promote a visual picture using a much better spacing for the specific information that will be applied to the appropriate cycles and the dates in this interesting calendar count. I hope you are blessed, and I hope you can pick up on this. But first, let's look at this calendar. This is a normal looking calendar. What we'll see has all the square boxes that goes horizontally. So this is the first month in the first year of the Exodus in Mitzrayim. We're going to start back here. I hope you can see my cursor. On the left-hand side, you will see first cycle. We have the pagan name beside it. Second cycle, and then the pagan name. I don't like the pagan names, but I have to use them so that people will understand what I'm talking about. Because if I come to people who had no idea about the second cycle, they'd look at me like a deer in the headlights, and I might as well not even talk. So these pagan names are here for recognition purposes only. Then we come down to the numbers in the boxes on the left-hand side of this box. 358, what is that? That's the 358th day of the year, or 358th cycle, to be more accurate. We come over here, 360. In this year on the Exodus, it was on a third cycle, the equinox, or Teshuvah. That's the 360th day of the year, the final day of the year. The very next day was a fourth cycle of the week. Yes, in pagan terms, it was a Wednesday. So this is New Year's Day. We count from New Year's Day, according to statute, you count 14 days to Passover. Passover is on Abib 14. You can read about that in Leviticus 23. They slew the lamb and they ate the lamb that night, and they stayed in their houses until dawn. Scripture tells us that. It was the command, and they obeyed. They left Mitzrayim sometime in the morning on this 15th day of the month, and they traveled 3 days. They traveled 3 days to offer sacrifices, and they camped in Sukkot first, Etham, and Pi-hahiroth. Now, you're going to see this information on the next slide, but I'm just trying to relate it to you so that you will recognize a little bit. This blue line here represents the Red Sea. Maybe it should have been red, but it is water. It's blue. This is the night of crossing of the Red Sea. And it was on if you go up to the top, it was on a sixth cycle of the week. It was a preparation, what we understand in pagan terms as a Friday. Note, after they come out of the Red Sea, that next morning, it was a seventh-day Sabbath. This is when their deliverance from Egypt was at dawn. So this is just hang on to that for a bit. We're going to talk more about this. Come over to the 19th. This is first fruits. This is the feast day that Yahushua kept after the crucifixion. After he was risen on that first cycle of the week, he observed first fruits. That's why you see a sheaf of grain here, of wheat, I should say, first fruits. And this is where you begin the Omer 1 count, the Omer 1 count to Shavuot or Pentecost. So you count 50 days. That's why there's these numbers here. Omer count 12. That's the last number on this slide. Now, this being said, I want you to look at these numbers, and I want you to erase all the boxes, all the colors in all the boxes, because you're going to see these numbers in a totally different format coming up. Here we go. I hope you can stick with me. This is the timeline from the year of the Exodus. Where does the Teshuvah, the vernal equinox, belong? On the left side here, under this heading, cycles of the week, you're going to see the numbers in a column coming here where my cursor is. You're going to see 1 to 7, 1 to 7, 1 to 7 in this column. Under this column in the middle, you're going to see the numbers. It's going to be the cycles of the month, 1 to 30. What date of the month is it? Is it the 10th, the 30th, or the 28th, whatever? You're going to see those numbers in a column right here. Under this green box, you're going to see the cycles of the year. The year at this point had 360 days. So you're going to see the numbers from 1 to 360 in this column. Why is it done like this? It's so this great big open area over here, I can put in comments. Okay, let's begin. The Teshuvah, it's the 360th cycle of the year. That's the equinox for those that are unfamiliar. Here is the fourth cycle of the week. And you see these numbers of the days of the week or cycles of the week. I have the seventh-day Sabbath marked out in blue. I have a line going across, and the date of the month is in blue. And you come across to the cycles of the year, I have that in blue. This is for alignment purposes. This is for you. These are witness. This is your first witness. This is your second witness. And this is your third witness, that everything is in alignment. Now, you're going to see a whole lot more numbers. So I want you to concentrate and make sure you understand this is the weeks over here. This is the months over here. And this is the dates of the year over here. So on the fourth cycle of the week, it's the first cycle of the year, number 1. It is New Year's cycle in the year of the Exodus. The fourth cycle of the week, and it was the first cycle of the first month as seen in the Exodus account, beginning with Exodus 12. Now, we're going to go back to, or no, we're going to remember the verse, Psalms 90, verse 12. Teach us to number our days. Why doesn't it say, teach us to look to the moon? Or teach us to read some other book, to find a calendar? No, it's recorded in Scripture. Teach us to number our days, to bring our hearts unto wisdom. So here we have, in the days of the year, we're going to count. It says here in this verse, Exodus 12:3, on the 10th day of this month, each one of them is to take for himself a lamb. That's the Passover lamb. So we go over here, the 10th, on the 10th of the month. We got it right here. It's the 10th of the year. Okay, very good. It's the 6th cycle of the week. Very good. And you shall keep it until the 14th day. So we have to do some more counting. Next slide. Let's do some more counting. This is month number 1 here. So this is month number 1. So the 14th of the first month, so this is Abib, the greening. The 14th day of the first month of the year, it is Passover in Mitzrayim. Passover. This is when Yahuah took out the firstborn. Did you hear me right? I said Yahuah did it. It was not the death angel. It was nobody else. Yahuah said, I do this. When you go into the Hebrew words and you look at the definitions and letters, it identifies Yahuah himself, our Father, who took out the firstborn. That being said, we're going to keep counting. Month number 1, this is the 15th. And the 15th here is the day that they exited Mitzrayim. They left Mitzrayim and they went to Sukkot and they camped as commanded in Sukkot. On the 16th, they traveled to Ephraim and they camped in Ephraim as command. Then the next day, on the, notice, it's the 6th cycle of the week. We know it as Friday, but I like to say it's the 6th cycle of the week because the 7th day Sabbath is next. Notice here, they went to Pi Hahiroth and they camped by the Red Sea. They were setting up camp. And we're going to read that at some point here fairly soon. Notice it's the 17th of the month. Now, what does these 3 stand for? Mosheh was commanded by Yahuah to meet Pharaoh at Boker, at the Nile. Boker is the very first crack of dawn, if you will, the eyelashes of dawn. Mosheh met Pharaoh there and says, let us go 3 days journey into the wilderness to sacrifice. He did this, I think it's 3 times. Let us go 3 days journey to sacrifice. Why? Well, if you understand, they were going to be sacrificing cows for one of the animals. And what is that? That's a problem with the Egyptians. They worshiped the cow. If they had been slaughtering cows in Mitzrayim, there would have been trouble. So this 3 is a safety factor. Let us travel 3 days into the wilderness to sacrifice unto Yahuah. There's your 3 days. And they fulfilled these by camping. Before sunset, Moshe declared to them, see the deliverance of Yahuah today, Exodus 14:13. So I hope you will open up your scriptures for me because I'm going to read this little section right now. I'm going to be starting on verse 9. It's Exodus 14, verse 9, and we're going to go through this very quickly. Verse 9. And the Mitzrites pursued them, and all the horses and the chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and reached them camping by the sea beside Pihahiroth, before Baal Zephon. So they were camping as commanded. They thought that their day had finished and they were going to sleep for the night. They were setting up camp. Verse 10. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes. Why would the scripture record they lifted their eyes? Well, we continue. And saw the Mitzrites coming up after them. Why did they have to lift their eyes? Because when you look at the picture of where they were on the wadi or the beach before the Red Sea, behind them are mountains. How did they know, if the mountains were between them, how did they know that they were being chased by the Egyptian army? It says here in verse 10 that they were greatly afraid. So they cried out to Yahuah, and they said to Moshe, did you take us away to die in the wilderness because there are no graves in Mitzrayim? What is this you have done to us to bring us out of Mitzrayim? Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Mitzrayim, saying, leave us alone and let us serve the Mitzrites? For it would have been better for us to serve the Mitzrites than to die in the wilderness. They were terrified. But they lifted up their eyes. Why did they lift their eyes? Because the dust from the Egyptian army behind the mountains. This army had horses, they had chariots, they had footmen, and they were causing a huge dust storm. That dust rose above the mountaintops. They lifted their eyes and they could see the cloud of dust behind them on the other side of the mountains, and they knew they were being chased. So the question is, what time of day was it? They would not see the cloud of dust if it was twilight. That's a little hint. It was before sunset. Please note this. It was before sunset. Very important coming up. Verse 13. And Moshe said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the deliverance of Yahuah, which he does for you tomorrow. Is that what it says? No. It says, which he does for you today. That word today is yom. It's 1 24-hour period. Remember, this time frame is before sunset. So I ask you, were the children of Israel delivered through the Red Sea before sunset? Think about that. Continuing on to verse 13. For the Mitzrites, whom you see today, you are never to see again. What happened? Well, they crossed through the Red Sea. The cloud come behind them, protected them. And cruising on here to verse 24 to move on in time. Verse 24, and it came to be in the morning watch. When is the morning watch? Well, the guard for the camp he's on guard. He's watching for the morning. It's the last shift before the light season. So this is approximately 3:30 in the morning. He's watching for dawn. Start verse 24 again. And it came to be in the morning watch that Yahuah looked down upon the army of the Mitzrites through the column of fire and cloud, and he brought the army of the Mitzrites into confusion, and he took off their chariot wheels. A little bit of humor there. So that they drove them with difficulty. Sure, you want to chase my people? Go for it. I'll take your wheels off. And the Mitzrites said, let us flee from the face of Yisrael. And I want you to notice this next phrase. Read these words and think about what's happening. For Yahuah fights for them against the Mitzrite. This fighting, if you will, it's an English word, this situation, Yahuah was in the act of creating their salvation. And yet, it's after sunset. How come? What factor does that have? Verse 26. Then Yahuah said to Moshe, stretch out your hand over the sea and let the waters come back upon the Mitzrites and on their chariots and on their horsemen. And Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its usual flow. When? At the break of day. Boker. That's the very, very first light that was possibly seen at the break of day, with the Mitzrites fleeing into it. Thus Yahuah overthrew the Mitzrites in the midst of the sea, and the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them, and not even one was left of them. So I ask you, when was their salvation accomplished? Wasn't it just as dawn surfaced? Their salvation today? So you go back to verse 13, when Moshe said, do not be afraid, stand still and see the deliverance of Yahuah, which he does for you today. Did you notice that the sunset did not change the day? And if you go up here onto the screen, you'll see this is the night they went through the Red Sea. The next dawn, when their salvation occurred, was on the 18th. It was a seventh-day Sabbath. The salvation today was accomplished at the break of day, with the Mitzrites fleeing into it. That's verse 27. Again, the 17th was the night of their salvation. This has happened just before dawn. And then you go to Exodus 14, verse 30, and you read, thus Yahuah saved Yisrael that day, singular. It was not 2 days. If it was 2 days, it would be yomim, and it would be plural. But that's not what the Hebrew has. The Hebrew has it that it was 1 24-hour period when they were saved. Therefore, the sunset failed to change the day. Very, very interesting. What else is interesting about this? Well, when they come out of the Red Sea, it was a seventh-day Sabbath. Move on. The salvation visualized at dawn on the seventh-day Sabbath, right here. And little interesting note here. What were the ladies doing? They were up singing and dancing with their timbrels. They were praising Yahuah, singing and dancing. Now, men, you don't travel very far when there's ladies up singing and dancing. They were not traveling. It was a seventh-day Sabbath. They were resting. They needed rest. I have a friend in Montana. He's on this panel tonight. He was driving his cattle 7 miles, and he had stopped at the 5th mile because his cattle were tired. He noticed that. Now, I want you to think about this. If you go up to this 6th cycle of the week, they were traveling from dawn over to the Pi-hahiroth point. They set up camp. It says here, in verse 9, they were camping by the sea, and then they had to repack up camp and travel across the Red Sea through the walls of water and get up on the other side. They were traveling for 24 hours. Do you think they needed rest? Do you think Yahuah had this planned? Or was this just coincidence? No, Yahuah doesn't operate that way. This was planned. They come up. Their salvation today was at dawn on a seventh-day Sabbath. This is your first recording of the seventh-day Sabbath starting at dawn in the Torah. Note that, please. So let's move on here. Now we have another column of numbers. Remember, we talked to you about the Omer count pattern. This is the count that you count to Pentecost, or Shavuot in Hebrew. You are to have 7 completed weeks. So in this column, you notice I have this 7 in blue. This is a completed week. There has been 6 days fulfilled, and the 7th day is the Sabbath, which completes, it seals off a week and gives rest. So here we have the first completed week. There's supposed to be 7 of these. So this is another witness, this column of numbers. It's another witness to you that what I'm about to show you is correct. So this is another witness. Keep all these numbers straight. And again, you'll notice Seventh Day Sabbath at the bottom. It's written in blue, and it's blue here, and it's blue over here. We got to keep this alignment. Very, very important. So these are completed weeks, the first and the second. This is required. You can read about that in Leviticus 23, verse 15. If you do not have 6 days with a Sabbath after it, you do not have a completed week. And there are calendars that will tell you differently. They will operate differently. They will operate with half weeks. Can you do that? Well, you discuss that with Yahuah. He said his weeks are completed. So let's cruise on. This is the second month. They were traveling. I want you to note there's the 39th day of the year and the 45th day when they came in, and the 46th and the 7th day Sabbath. Notice it's the day before the Sabbath right now. The children of Yisrael, note these words, came into. They were traveling. This is ultra important for this study. If you don't recognize these words, you will accept a lunar calendar, and you will accept, well, we'll just continue. We'll keep on going, and you'll see. They came into on the 15th day of the second month. They were traveling on the preparation day. Have you noticed the very specific cycle of the week that the 15th of the second month was? It was a preparation cycle. And the next cycle was the 7th day Sabbath. Moving on. This is a crucial calendar point. It was not, I emphasize, it was not a Shabbat. The children, okay, when at the top you will see I have repeat here. And what that means is the numbers are repeated, but the comments are different. And I repeated the numbers because I had more to say about these charts. So this is what the repeat means. So don't be confused, please. So with these same numbers, again, the children of Israel came into, they traveled the wilderness of Sin on the 15th day of the second month. The 15th of the second month was a preparation day. So, what effect does this scriptural revelation have upon the lunar Sabbath calendar, which demands each and every second Shabbat of their month, always and without exception, must fall upon the 15th of every month, not just 1, 2, 3, every month. That's their demand. Is there a problem here? Is something conflicting? So I ask you, who is your authority? Is it the Torah or is it the moon? They declare, the lunar calendar, one of them, a few of them, declares that the 15th is a 7th day Sabbath. Well, not in the Exodus account, not in scripture. Sorry, but that's a false doctrine. Very, very important to note that. Moving on. Again, same numbers, same charts. The children of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin on the 15th day of the second month. It's important. I'm repeating this for a reason. Note that scripture provides us with a specific date. Accuracy is paramount. Scripture will tell you a date, or it'll tell you a cycle of the week when it's needed. So the next verse, the very next verse, and all the congregation of the children of Israel grumbled against Mosheh and Aharon in the wilderness. Does a traveling congregation stretched out for miles, remember there is many, many, many people, animals and wagons, could they mumble and grumble? No. They had to congregate. They had to form a committee, if you will, and that is how they grumbled against Moshe and Aharon. This factor I did not see in this calendar for a very long time, and nothing worked out. I could not understand how it is that the children arrived at Mount Sinai 3 days before, when Yahuah said, "In 3 days I will come down on the mount." I could not get the calendar to work out until I realized this point. This is why I'm stressing it. They were traveling on this day. It was not a Shabbat. The next day was the seventh day Shabbat. Again, you'll see it. The children of Israel came into the wilderness unseen on the 15th day of the second month. What about the next verse? Exodus 16, verse 2. The congregation were assembled. They were not traveling on the Shabbat, and they were complaining heavily to Moshe, complaining. So we need another witness here. Will the Omer count be a witness to this Shabbat assembly? Here is the column of numbers of the month. So, sorry. This is the column of the numbers of the count to the Omer. See, even I get mixed up, but we'll get it straight. So these are the numbers 1 to 50. Here's your third completed week. Here's your fourth completed week. And here's your fifth completed week. So we're in line. Everything's lined up. It's looking good so far. Moving forward. On that Shabbat assembly, we hear from Yahuah. They were complaining. They wanted quail. Well, they wanted meat is what they wanted. And Yahuah heard them. They were his children. He loves them. He says, "See, I'm raining bread in order to try them, whether they will walk my law or not." Exodus 16, verse 4. Yahuah was about to provide them with his proactive trial, which required their participation. Now, I ask you, when you were in school and you were going to get your test, were you provided with half the information and then given a test which would grade your mark for the year? No. You were given the complete amount of information for your test. Whether you knew it or not is a different story. And that's what's happening here. Yahuah was giving them a test. You're hungry. You want meat. Okay, I've heard you. I'm going to give you a test, and it is to try you, whether you will obey my law or not. What about this law? How come there was a law before Sinai? I was told that they didn't have a law up until Sinai. What law is this, what he was talking about? Anyhow, we'll talk about that in a bit. I want you to note what day of the month it was and what cycle of the week it was. It is the seventh day Sabbath right now, and this is when they received their quail. Yahuah said to them, "I have heard the grumblings of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, between the evenings you are to eat meat." Evenings, as in the mixture. He heard them. "And in the morning you are to be satisfied with bread, and you shall know that I am Yahuah, your Elohim." There's the verses we can read about this. So I want you to look over here in this column of the light green numbers. These are the days of the manna. This is your test. There are lunar calendars that will have you start in the midst of the week for this manna test because they cannot line up. The lunar calendar does not line up with scripture. But Yahuah is going to try them. He would give them, as his pattern is at creation, 6 days before the seventh day Sabbath. That's his pattern. He will not break that. He said, in the evening, in the twilight mixture, you're going to receive quail. I've heard you. Now, we are taught that you can't cook on the seventh day Sabbath. You're not allowed to cook. That's true. That's a statute. The cooking and preparing is to be done on the preparation day. We're going to see that in a bit. So how is it that he gave them quail on the seventh day Sabbath and said to eat, did he make them sin? No. The key is up here at the top. See, I am raining bread in order to try them. We need to remember these people had been in Mitzrayim in Egypt for a great many years. There was also a great many of the people that come out with them that were Egyptian. They did not understand Yahuwah's order, his laws. So Yahuwah is giving them a test. And how can he test them about not eating on the seventh day, or not cooking on the seventh day Sabbath, if he hadn't given them the instruction, if they did not know about it, if they had forgotten about it? Well, at this point, Yahuwah understood their situation and he said, okay, I'm going to give you an illustration of my law. I'm going to try you if you will obey my law or not. So the quail came. The quail came in the evening on the seventh day Sabbath. And the next morning, when the manna was to come. So the manna, when the command for the manna was to gather it 6 days. We read that in Exodus 16, verse 26. Here is your numbered 6 days right here. 6th day, in the preparation, they were to gather a double share, a double portion for the seventh day Sabbath. The manna week, this is an appointment, and I accentuate it on purpose. This is a pillar of covenant calendar. This is a standard of Yahuwah, which he seeded onto this earth. This pattern cannot be broken by man. Oh, yes, men can attempt it. They can declare it. They can try. But man cannot break this pattern. Yahuwah has declared it so. So it says here in Exodus 16, verse 13, and it came to be that the quails come up that evening and covered the camp. Again, it was the seventh day Sabbath. That evening, the word here is erev in Hebrew. When you understand this word, it's a mixture. It's the time of twilight. It's a mixture when the light is when the darkness is overtaking the light. It's a mixture. Light and darkness are mixing. So the quail come up in the twilight. He said, between the evenings or between the mixtures, you are to eat meat. So they gathered the quail in the mixture, the twilight time, and they cooked it after the mixture or after the erev. So they ate it between the mixture of evening twilight and between the mixture of the boker in the morning before sunrise. So they accomplished this very, very well. They fulfilled the command perfectly. And what else did he say? He was talking here, if we come over here on the first day of the manna, he commanded them, he said, and in the morning, I shouldn't say he commanded them. This is just information. I'm jumping ahead of myself. And in the morning, that would be boker, that's the first light, the dew lay all around the camp. And the layer of dew went up, and see, on the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance, as fine as frost on the ground. Exodus 16, verse 14. What is it? They're looking at this. What is this stuff? And Mosheh said to them, it is the bread which Yahuwah has given you to eat. He promised them bread in the morning. The quail come first. They filled their appetite with meat. And Yahuwah says, now you're going to eat healthy. Here's the manna. That come in the morning. The command for the manna was, gather it 6 days, but on the seventh, which is the Shabbat, there is none. Notice how those 6 days fill out this week, and on the next day is a seventh day Sabbath. I have it marked in blue for alignment purposes. Excuse me. And blue over here for alignment purposes. These are witnesses to you about covenant calendar. These are the things that you need to take notice of, the appointments that Yahuwah placed. All these appointments have to be in place and observed by Moshe leading the Hebrew nation. If these are not observed properly, the Hebrew nation will not get to Mount Sinai in time to receive the law. Moving forward, the command was to gather manna for 6 cycles and achieve gathering the double portion on the preparation. Unless 5 cycles of gathering had been accomplished first, the double portion on the preparation could not be fulfilled correctly according to the command. The manna week cannot start in midweek as some calendars require. Covenant calendar achieves these timing appointments perfectly. These scriptural appointments are how covenant calendar is realized. There are other calendars which declare that the 15th of this second month was the Shabbat, and this conflicts with the scripture's documentation. For the Israelites to be fully tested on their obedience, a complete 6 cycles of picking manna must have been fulfilled before the Shabbat could occur. The manna week is just one of the foundational pillars within the covenant. It is also a central stabilizing base within the calendar of Yahuah. This covenant was agreed to 3 times by the Hebrew nation before it was ratified in blood and sealed with the covenant meal on the mount. We're going to come to that. Now I ask you, it said there, Yahuah said, this test, if they will walk in my law or not. What happened? How is it that the law was before Mount Sinai? I thought Moshe received the law at Mount Sinai. What law is this? Well, we're going to read more about this. What law existed before Mount Sinai? How could it be a law? Mount Sinai and the receiving of the stone tablets had not happened yet. The Aaronic priesthood within the Levitical tribe was not even commissioned yet. How can the Torah already be the guideline of Yahuah to test the Israelites? What law was there that existed before Mount Sinai? In Exodus 18, we find that Moshe was teaching the Hebrew nation. What was Moshe teaching from? Where was Moshe receiving his instructions? And may I go back to Abraham? Abraham was credited as obeying Yahuah. So what was he obeying? It was credited to him as righteousness. What law was Abraham obeying before Mount Sinai? Could it be? What about the Melchizedek order? Remember in Genesis 1, verses 11 and 12, the DNA of this earth is repeated twice there. The DNA, if you will, seed within a seed according to its kind. Everything on this earth must be seeded from Zion or from Zion. Everything has to be seeded. If it's rogue, it will not last. This Melchizedek order, the law that Abraham was obeying, and it was credited to him as righteousness, this law that Moshe was teaching the people before Mount Sinai is from the Melchizedek order. It's what was seeded onto this earth through Adam. Let's read here. Exodus 18, verse 16. When they have a matter, they come to me, and I rightly rule between one and another, and make known the laws of Elohim and his Torot. Laws, statutes, and laws. There's the word, the Torot. This is what he was teaching from. Clearly, Moshe knew about Yahuah's order of righteousness, which existed long before creation. It was these same statutes and laws that in a short time Moshe would write down in what? The book of the covenant. He would write down these words from Yahuah into a book called the Book of the Covenant. And this would happen even before receiving the tablets from from Yahuah on the mount. I want you to note these red words. The book of the law That's with the Aaronic priesthood, the temple services, and the substantial increase of sacrifices with oblation did not exist yet. It was unheard of. And yes, it was a substantial increase of sacrifices. Again, I'm going to emphasize again on the manna week here. It is this important. And on the sixth day, they gathered twice as much bread. They were obeying this law that Moshe had been teaching them. They were obeying Yahuah's instruction. The sixth day, they gathered twice as much. So let's go forward here. But no, let's back up. I want to point out to you, this sixth day, the double portion of manna, is the 22nd of the month. It's a preparation day. And the day after is a seventh day Sabbath. Note this very, very clearly. Seventh day Sabbath. These are your witnesses. What did Moshe say here after they gathered their double portion? He said, tomorrow. Tomorrow. That's the day after this day. That's the day after preparation. Tomorrow is a rest. Tomorrow is a Shabbat, Kodesh to Yahuah, or set apart. That which ye bake, bake. That which you cook, cook. Do that today. This is the day of preparation. And they laid it up until morning as Moshe commanded, and it did not stink, and no worms was in it. And Moshe said, eat it today, for today is a Shabbat to Yahuah. Today you do not find it in the field. Exodus 16, verses 24 to 26. No, the people rested on the seventh day. I want you to note, it's the 23rd of the month. It's the seventh day Sabbath. It's the 35th count to the Omer. It's the fifth completed week of the count to the Omer. It's the 53rd day of the year. Your witnesses right here, keep these in mind, because this is what is going to steer you into covenant calendar. Again, there's your seventh day Sabbath on the 23rd. Please notice which cycle of the week and month that Moshe spoke these words. Tomorrow is a rest. It's a Shabbat. It is Kodesh to Yahuah. I want you to note here very carefully, the 22nd of this month was not a lunar Shabbat. The lunar Shabbat calendar has a very serious problem with Scripture. Why? Because it simply does not match the words that are written in the Torah. Is that serious? I'll let you decide. Again, the 23rd was a Shabbat, according to Scripture. And Moshe said, eat it today, for today is a Shabbat to Yahuah. Today you do not find it in the field. We might note with intensity that the lunar Shabbat requirement of the 22nd is annihilated right here by Moshe's decree. So we're moving on now. We're going to go into the third month, as you can see there. Let's read what we have here. In the third month, after the children of Israel had come out of Mitzrayim, on this day they came into the wilderness of Sinai, Exodus 19, verse 1. Why do I have day emphasized? Well, Scripture tells us day. It does not give us a date. Why? What's this got to do, Tim? Why are you bringing this forward? Well, when you read Numbers 33:3, it tells us they come out on the 15th of the month. They come out of Mitzrayim. And there is confusion with this. There is a calendar that wants to designate this day right here, the fourth of the month. They demand that it was the 15th day or 15th date of the month that they came into the wilderness. That's their calendar demand, but it does not work. When you make this date the 15th of the month, the third month, you do not come to, or the children of Israel do not come to Mount Sinai at the correct time. for the receiving of the 10 Commandments. The count to the Omer is blown to smithereens. It does not work. So you will see here this column in the red, outlined in red. You see the 6th completed week. That's the count to the Omer. And you come down to here. Here's the 49th day. If you read Leviticus closely, you will see this. It's the 49th day. It's the 7th completed week. And Pentecost or Shavuot is declared in Scripture to be on the first day after the 7th-day Sabbath as the 50th count. Here's 49. We have one more cycle to go. So what happens when that other calendar demands that this or actually, I shouldn't say it that way. I should say when they demand that when they come into this area of the wilderness was the 15th, it puts it way beyond this chart. It blows it out of the water. You have no linear alignment with Scripture. So again, when it says in Scripture they come out of Mitzrayim on this day, they're referencing the 4th cycle of the week, not date. Very, very, very important. These are the things that we struggled with, that we fought with, because we were coming out of the lunar calendar and we had to learn these things the hard way. We had to write this out maybe 100, 150 times and then throw it in the garbage because it didn't work out. That is the process of learning. Learning that when it says day, it means day. It does not mean date. Very, very important. Moving on here. I hope I'm not stressing this too much. Oh, there we are again. Day, not date. I think you've heard me say that. The 4th cycle amidst of the week. Very, very important. Now, what about these 2 black squares here? 1, 2, 3. Notice the second square is equal to the 49th day. This is the last day of the Omer count. On the 50th day of the count is when Shavuot or Pentecost is, according to Leviticus 23. But back here on the preparation day, see, they entered into the wilderness and then they had to travel another day to get to the mount. Here is where they were at Mount Sinai. And the command, the instruction from Yahuah to Mosheh, what did he say? Go to the people and kadosh them, cleanse them, in other words, kadosh them today and tomorrow. For on the 3rd day, there's your 3 days, on the 3rd day, Yahuah shall come down from Mount Sinai before the eyes of all the people. They had 3 days, actually they had 2 days to prepare. Wash your clothes. Well, that's what we read in English. What kind of washing would they do? On the first day was a preparation. They would be cleansing, washing their clothes quite literally. They would be straightening up their camp. They would be organizing their camp, and anything that did not belong in their tent would be out. You are going to meet your Creator. You had best be prepared. The second day, this is a Shabbat. No work is to be done. No physical work, civil work according to our lives is not to be done. What were they kadoshing? What were they cleansing on this day? Well, they had a whole lot of spiritual doodah that had to be removed from their minds. Prepare your minds to meet your Creator. Are you in a position where you can meet your Creator? Prepare for this. This is what happened on the 7th-day Sabbath. For on the first day after the 7th-day Sabbath, on Shavuot, on Pentecost, I am going to come down on the mount, on Mount Sinai. Yes, it was the 50th day of the Omer count, fulfilled with absolute perfection, covenant calendar. When I saw this, when Charlene and I saw this pattern fulfilled, it just amazed us. We had never seen any other calendar that could fulfill this perfectly, full scriptural alignment with all the appointments fulfilled to the dates, to the commands. This is the first time we saw this. We were elated, to be honest. Okay, let's move on. Leviticus 23, verse 16. It declares the 50th day is the day for Shavuot. Fulfilled perfectly. Again, look at this slide. I must have something more to say about it. On the 50th day, what's it say in Scripture? Exodus 19, verse 6. And it came to be on the third day. When? In the morning. Remember, that's Moshe was commanded to meet Pharaoh in the morning. This is a pattern. Yahuah also came down at Boker in the morning. On the third day in the morning, that there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of a shofar, very loud, and all the people who were in the camp trembled. Why do I have ram's horn crossed out with an arrow coming up from shofar? Because I do not believe that Yahuah had to kill a ram, remove the horn so that he could blow a trumpet on the mount. I believe through the Hebrew words and definitions that Yahuah had a silver trumpet, one that would expound on the frequency of righteousness. It was not a ram's horn. It was a silver trumpet, a shofar. Anyhow, this is what happened on the 50th count on Shavuot, on Pentecost. Leviticus 23, verse 16, fulfilled. Mount Sinai, appointment, fulfilled. Remember, this is a portal. This is an appointment. A portal is an opening. What come through that opening? This is the receiving of the law of the 10 Devarim under the order of Melchizedek, the order of righteousness. Moshe will soon receive the Melchizedek order of righteousness written on tablets. Would the yet future Aharonic priesthood, would it be in need of a meeting place from which to conduct the imposed book of the law? I ask you, did Yahuah have a plan for the raising of the tabernacle? Excuse me. This is calendar. This is why I'm asking you this ahead of time. Is there a plan for this tabernacle that was to be raised in the second year in the wilderness? Would that plan, would that stem from Shavuot, from Mount Sinai? Was there a valid reason? And okay, everyone, this is the crux of this matter right here. This question is important. Please focus. Was there a valid reason to wait until a specific cycle of the year to lay out the foundation for setting up the wilderness tabernacle? What would you do if I told you that the wilderness tabernacle was actually a compass, a celestial oriented compass? The children of Israel were not wandering aimlessly like we've been taught in the wilderness. Yahuah gave them the best compass that man knows of. It was aligned with the Matzeroth, just what we heard this morning. So I'm asking you, is there a specific cycle of the year that the foundation for this tabernacle compass could be laid upon or could be built upon? This is where we're going, everyone. Our answer will come near the end of this study. And I ask you again, would a plan constitute being prepared? Yahuah is teaching us preparation all through Scripture. Might this plan to raise the wilderness tabernacle, might there be a preparation? Note, I'm emphasizing these words for a reason. Might there be a preparation for their wilderness travels? What valid reason could there be to plan a specific cycle of the year to prepare the foundation for the correct orientation according to the Matzeroth for the wilderness tabernacle? Is it important? What about that command to Moshe to raise the tabernacle on the first day of the first month in the second year in the wilderness? Was there a plan? What if that wilderness tabernacle is a Kodesh celestial compass orchestrated by the Mazzaroth? And I asked you, what if? And I would like to suggest to you strongly that it is, or it was, however you want to look at it. Continuing on, the command, here it is. This is from Yahuah, Exodus 40, verse 2. On the first day of the first month. Well, how do I know that? Because you look at the sliver moon and it's all over the board. It jumps around. You can have up to 30 days difference. Yahuah, how do I know which day is the first day of the first month? Will you tell me? Remember, Moshe was trained in the wisdom of the Egyptians, of the Mitzrites. Moshe already knew the timing. So when Yahuah said to Moshe, on the first day of the first month, you are to raise up the dwelling place of the tent of meeting, you think Moshe knew exactly what was happening? I do. I'll bet you he was looking forward to that day. Had Yahuah already made preparations? Preparations. I'm hinting very strongly here, everyone. This last day of the year, do you think it was a preparation for the raising of the tabernacle? Just a thought. Would it be on the Teshuvah, the day of the shadow? Would that be the cycle before the first day of the first month? Please note here that the term tent of meeting from here on will be referencing the circular wilderness tabernacle. It will not be referencing Moshe's meeting place where he instructed the people prior to Mount Sinai. The circular wilderness tabernacle, governed by the Mazzaroth. Okay, that being said, I'm going to jump ship here for a little bit because there's another false doctrine that we need to understand. When you read Leviticus 23 in that chapter, you read about the count, the 50-day count, or the 7 completed weeks to Shavuot. There are people that want to confuse that. They do not understand the words. They do not understand the Hebrew words. They do not study it out. And they will tell you that there is an extended 49 cycle count or a 49-day count for a complete 99 cycle count to the Omer. This is what you'll be told. And if you don't know why this is false, you might just go this way because, well, if you've been taught that way and you don't know any different, it's easy to fall into deception. So what we're doing here, you will look on the left, this red column here with the numbers. We are going to count out this 49-day or 49 cycle count to the Omer or the second Omer, according to what they demand. Let's prove it. Let's prove it by Torah. Let's prove it by the covenant. Is it correct? Let's continue. There's your count. Lots more red numbers. And this brings us through the third month into the fourth month. I want you to look down here at the very bottom. There's 28 days of the false Omer count. I declare it's false. You don't know that, so prove it. We'll show you. It's 28 days thus far. So let's see where these extra 49 days extend to. Let's see if it's supported with scripture or if it came from somewhere else. Continuing on with the count, this is going through month number 4. See, here's the weekly cycles on the left over here. Here's the cycles of the month of number 4 here. And we come up to the 49 cycle count of the second count to the Omer. Interesting. Did you notice this comes out on a 7th-day Sabbath? What day was it when Moshe came down the mount? What cycle of the week was it? The 49th cycle of the second Omer count, let me start this again. The 49th cycle of the second Omer count The seventh completed week of the false Omer count has been accomplished. So what's next? Oh, oh, here's a picture. I hope this one raises your eyebrows. Remember that Shavuot had to be on the first day of the week after the seventh day Sabbath. Well, yes, it's the first cycle of the week after the seventh day Sabbath. It's got that right. Well, it must be right then. Is it? Really? This false Omer count, the 50th day lands on the 27th of this month. What cycle is it? What happened? Better yet, what festival is this celebrating? The erroneously extended Omer count dogma accurately achieves identifying the exact cycle when Moshe came down from the mount. He shattered the tablets, illustrating his contempt after witnessing the festival of the golden calf. If you're looking at this PowerPoint, this study, and if you have heard about this double count to the Omer, or if maybe you're already observing it, may I suggest to you that you are observing the festival of the golden calf without knowing it. If you want to see a very detailed study about these days coming up to this point, we have that for you, just for the asking. But this is just an overview right now. I wanted you to see this second count to the Omer is a celebration of the golden calf. Moshe was not celebrating. Continuing on, Moshe shattered the sapphire tablets. He was illustrating the obvious fracture the base revelers had forcefully imposed upon Yahuah's covenant. Didn't take them long to break it, did it? They had said 3 times they agreed, and the third time they said they will obey. That got shattered, didn't it? Well, we're going to keep going through the months here. You'll see I have month number 5, we have month number 6. Now I've added a little square here, this purple or pink, however, fuchsia color, I guess. Not too good with colors, I just know I like them. This little box here is just another witness for you. It's the 5th month. 5 times 30 is 150. So we have the numbers right. Why is this important? Well, when I was building this chart, it was a lot more important to me because, I can't even tell you how many times I did these numbers all by hand. All by hand. And I had to make absolutely certain that I had my numbers correct. What if I missed a number? What if I counted this 144 twice? Or what if I counted it as 133 and missed the 44? This number would not be right. But here, 5 times 30, 30 days in a month, 5 times 30 is 150. So I've got the month right, and I've got the cycles of the year right thus far. So again, this is another witness for you watching this, to understand whether this is right or whether it's wrong. So we're going to keep counting on Yahuah's calendar. We're going to count to the 12th month and the 360th day. Here's month number 6. This little girl, I think she listened to Psalms 90, verse 12. Teach us to number our days. She's putting her fingers to work. Month number 7. Okay, there's that verse. Teach us to number our days and let us bring the heart to what? To wisdom. Why wisdom? Do you remember me saying that the feast days, the appointments of Yahuah, are portals? What else, other than fellowship with Yahuah, would we get through these portals? We would get blessing. Yahuah has promised that when we are on his feast appointments, we will receive his blessing that he is just waiting to impart on us. Get your cup out, my children. Here are your blessings. So these feasts in the 7th month, you will see here, this is the first day of this month. It's trumpets, the time of blowing the trumpets. You'll read about this in Leviticus 23, verse 24 to 37. You read about the Moedim, these Kodesh appointed times. This one is on atonement. It's on the 10th of the 7th month. You notice I'm not giving the months pagan names. It's the 7th month, according to Yahuah. And the day, the festival, is atonement. It's very, very serious. Down here is Sukkot. This is the beginning of tabernacles. This is the blessings that Yahuah promised us in the portals. This is wisdom. Teach us to number our days and let us bring the heart to wisdom. Do you see a moon involved here? No. You see numbers. Yahuah said, number your days. What do you think Noah was doing in the ark? He was not looking at the sliver moon. He was looking at his numbers. Did he have them on the wall? Well, I don't know where he put them, but he was most certainly numbering his days. Continuing on, we're going into Shemini Atzeret. This is the 8th day of tabernacles. It's the final day. It's the last great day. Now we're going to jump ahead to the time of Yahusha, and we're going to read a little bit here from John 37. What happened on this last great day? Let's read in John. In the last day, that great of the feast. Notice I didn't read day because it's in italics. It wasn't in the original. That great day of the feast, Yahusha stood and cried, saying, if any man thirst, let him go look at the moon. No, it does not say that. Yahusha is protesting against the lunar-based calendar. He went up into the middle of this feast of the Yahudim. It was not his feast. It was on a different calendar. It was on a lunar-based calendar. And Yahuah is, or sorry, and Yahusha is saying to these people, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. Unto me. I have the truth for you. This festival that you are on is a false festival. If you go a few verses later, you will read where Yahusha tells them at that feast, did not Moshe give you the Torah? Yet not one of you is doing the Torah. Not one. And people want to tell me that Yahusha was keeping the feast of the Yahudim on the lunar calendar. Sorry, Yahuah said it was wicked. When you read in verse 7, I hope people are listening to those words because that's what he said. It was 1,500 plus years later when Yahusha would witness against the lunar calendar, the calendar of the Yahudim. It was at their lunar feast of Sukkot, their feast. It was not Yahusha's feast. Remember, he told his brothers, your time is always ready, but my time is not yet. His time was on a different calendar than their lunar-based calendar. I hope we're listening to his words, not just his words. I hope you're listening to his sandals. Have you ever heard a sandal speak? What about when Yahusha went up into the midst of their feast? His sandals are screaming the words out, I protest against this calendar. This is a lunar-based calendar. He's protesting by his sandals, his footwork. But yet, all these years, we have been so oblivious to his feet. Please allow me to suggest to you, it's time to listen to his sandals. It's also time to read Isaiah. Why? In context of the word there. Yahuah was distancing himself from their lunar-based calendar. He said in Isaiah 1, I hate your new moons and your assemblies. They are an abomination to me. Does it get any stronger? Then how come we are still observing by the moon? I shouldn't say we, because I do not. How come we are hearing messages to go by the moon when Yahusha witnessed so strongly against it, not just with his voice, but with his sandals? Okay, let's move on here. I get on a little bit of a rant there, but it's important. We need to listen to his words and what he did. Month number 8. We're going back here into the year of the Exodus. Month number 8. 8 times 30. I think that's 240. That's what I got recorded here. It's another witness that we have our numbers straight. It's the 5th cycle of the week. At that point, the 30th day of the month. That's the final day of the months. There is no more days than 30. It doesn't matter what calendar tells you there's a 31st day. It does not exist in Scripture. 30 days strictly. Here, 240th day of the year, all alignment. And here, 7th day Sabbath coming up. Let's continue. Let's go through month number 9. This little guy on the right here, he's counting his days. Love it. Go through month number 9. 9 times 30, 270. Well, we're right so far. Got to keep straight here with these witnesses. Month number 10. Let's cruise through month number 10. This little guy looks pretty happy. He's got all fingers going here. Excellent. 10. 10 times 30, 300. Well, we got the numbers right so far. What about month number 11? Let's go into month number 11. Yeah, the little guy here, he's thinking. What are you thinking? He's saying, what about month 12? We're in month 11. What happens in month number 12? Let's look at it. Month number 12. It's getting close to the end of the year. Here's month number 11. 11 times 30, 330. That's right. We're good so far. Good to go. Scriptural alignment. Month number 12. Excuse me. Notice down here, it's the 7th day of the week. It's the 17th day of the month at the end of this chart, and it's 347 of the year. Month number 12. It's going to get pretty important. Recent teachings have surfaced that declare the tabernacle was raised on a normal cycle of the week. The declaration is made that because the tabernacle was raised, and this would be unacceptable work by man's standards, that had to be a weekly cycle, and that the teshuvah was on the very day it was raised. The reasoning given is that the teshuvah shadow was used to orient the tabernacle accurately. And I say, most certainly the teshuvah shadow light was used to orient the foundation of the tabernacle. Let's look at it, shall we? But first, I want to say, and for this, some of you won't understand this, but some of you will, that shadow is marked from morning until twilight. So it takes a full light season for that shadow to lay the foundation. So how is it that Mosheh could lay the foundation and raise the tabernacle on the same day? It doesn't work that way. Just a thought. Let's read this. This is from the Geneva, so you're going to see a little bit different English. This is Old English. This was the command. He was commanded to raise the tabernacle, and it says here, thus the tabernacle was reared up on the first day of the first month in the 2nd year. So Moshe accomplished this. Now it's our duty to find out just how he accomplished it. What physical reason caused Yahuah to command the tent of meeting to be raised on the first cycle of the 2nd year? Was there a physical command or a physical reason? Or did Yahuah just throw a number in the air and say, well, I think this fits? No. Yahuah is an Elohim of order. There is nothing coincidence, and there is nothing that is not planned. Why? Why did Yahuah wait until the year end to prepare, as in stake out the foundation for the tent of meeting? Why didn't he do that in the 10th month? Why did he wait? Was there a reason to wait until the 360th day of the year to raise the tent of meeting? What about this Kodesh celestial compass concept? Would that have anything to do with the equinox? How often have you been told that watching the equinox is pagan? What if it was written in Scripture? What if it was seeded from Zion onto this earth with the idea, the reality of eternity surrounding it? Would that wake up your eyes? Would that raise your or open up your ears? And I ask you, was there only one highly specific cycle of the Shanae upon which the foundation for the dwelling place could be accurately oriented? Was there only one? Or was there, why didn't he do it on the last week? Why not? Why did he wait till the last day of the year? Just a question for you to think about before we go to the next slide. I get this coming on here. And I got a illustration here, and that form comes underneath oriented, accurately oriented. How is it that the Matzeroth, which is Yahuah's timepiece, how is it that can orient this tabernacle? What takes place on the final day? Could this factor tie in with the Teshuvah shadow light? Would the Teshuvah, or the equinox, would that render pertinent information for laying the wilderness tabernacle foundation on the last day of the year? I know I've asked this question many times, and I want you to think about it a lot, because this is important. This is calendar. It is this foundation that is going to bring our Mashiach back to this earth in his time. Are we paying attention? Might the shadow of Teshuvah, might that have corresponded appropriately on a preparation cycle immediately before raising the tent of meeting? Remember, Yahuah is teaching the nation to be prepared. What about the raising of the tabernacle? Was there a preparation on a preparation day for that? Have we been noticing that Yahuah purposely organizes the preparation days perfectly, being immediately before very important events? Is there a preparation lesson to be learned here? Let's look at month number 12. I want you to look at the cycles of the year. These are the numbers. Teach us to number our days, to bring our hearts unto wisdom. All these numbers are bringing you to wisdom. I hope you recognize that. 360. 360. This is the perfect circle, the degrees in a perfect circle. This 360 reveals pi, infinity. This is Yahuah's character. This is his stamp. This is seal, his sign, his reality, infinity. And this is given to you and I in the form of earth. It's the 12th month. 12 times 30 is 300. 12 times 30 days is 360. That is an eternal number when you look at it. What happened on the last day of this year? At the final day of the final cycle of the circle is the equinox. We read about this in Scripture. This equinox, we can see this through the Hebrew word teshuvah. It's a turning. It's the final day of the Tequfah circuit. The Tequfah circuit has 360 cycles or days at this point. Today, it's 365. But at this point in the Exodus, there's 360. And the final cycle, the 30th day of the 12th month, is the day of the Teshuvah, or the equinox. Are we ready? It's the preparation, the sixth cycle of the week, a preparation. You should not be surprised. Teshuvah, or equinox, is the last cycle of the year. It is 360. On this preparation, Mosheh staked out the measurements on the ground according to the shadow light for proper tent of meeting orientation. This is to be expected. I said, you should not be surprised. This is to be expected. Our Creator is organized and He is prepared and He is perfection. No, you do not need a 13th month to organize with the season. Yahuah gave Aharon a rock for his breastplate. It was called Thummim, and the meaning is perfection. He does not need man to intercalate his calendar. It was designed perfectly from the get-go, and it never changed. Moving on here. The importance, too fast here. Let me back up. The importance of orienting the dwelling place accurately is clearly understood from Solomon's temple. The orientation was specifically to determine the cycle of Teshuvah. The light from the sun on the Teshuvah cycle was to enter into the Kodesh place. We understand this from Solomon's temple with the two entrance pillars of Yachin and Boaz. On the day before equinox or before Teshuvah, the sun would strike one pillar, either Yachin or Boaz, I'm not sure which. The day of the equinox, the day of Teshuvah, that sun would go between the pillars and it would enter into the most holy place and illuminate it. The day after, it would strike the other pillar and would not go into the most Kodesh place, the most holy place. It was only on the day of Teshuvah that sun would go in. Now, when I'm going to leave this for later in a little bit. I'll leave that comment. Let's continue on. Whoops, I pressed the wrong button. Next one coming up here. I want you to look here. After the Teshuvah, when you see this count, we've come on the count to 360. It's the 12th month. There's 30 days in each month. The year has ended. The Shoneh, that which repeats of itself, seed within a seed according to its own kind, that is finished. It must now begin its cycle of repeating after itself. To do a second time is the definition. The Shoneh is about to do a second time. It is New Year's cycle. It's on the 7th day Sabbath. Did you notice this? It's on a 7th day Sabbath, and it's the first cycle of the second year. Notice here, I've got it written. Year number 2, it's month number 1, and it's the first cycle of the month. What was commanded to Mosheh? The command was, on that next cycle, on the first day of the first month of the second year in the wilderness, Mosheh, you are to raise the tent of meeting. Let me tell you, when I first saw this, when I first got to this point, I stood up in my chair and I backed up from my paper because I looked at that and I said, there is no way that Mosheh is going to raise the tabernacle on the 7th day Sabbath. That's work. And then I got to thinking, maybe my tradition has got my brain messed up. Maybe I don't understand Yahuah's words and his command. Maybe I don't understand that when when Yahuah says to do something, we say, how high? We do not ask, well, what day is it? No. When Mosheh was commanded to raise the tabernacle on the first day of the first month in the second year in the wilderness, we just read the verse that says he had accomplished it. It was done. He raised the tabernacle on a 7th day Sabbath. It is Yahuah's house. It is Yahuah's program. It is Yahuah's compass. When he commands you to do it, you say, yes, sir, my father. As Samuel said when Yahuah was calling him, here am I. I will stand. I will walk. I will do your word, Yahuah. Mosheh raised the tabernacle on the 7th day Sabbath. So the question is, why? after the Teshuvah? What is it about the Teshuvah that allowed him to do that? In a bit, we'll answer that. In the meantime, just as the showbread was commanded to be renewed on Shabbat morning, the tabernacle was commanded to be raised up on the Shabbat. It's Yahuwah's work. This was the commanded will of Yahuah, his works of righteousness to be done by man on his Shabbat. And we should be thinking, no problem here, Father. Your command is what I should do and what I will do. Again, is not the sixth cycle a preparation? Was not Moshe prepared on a preparation on the last day of the year? Be prepared is what the scriptures teach through and throughout Yahuwah's word, from the beginning to the end. Do you think Moshe understood this? Moshe's wisdom. Moshe might have arranged for somebody to pick up his double portion of manna in this preparation cycle. That way, he and other men could prepare the foundation measurements of the tabernacle by the Teshuvah shadow light. Shadow. Moshe was not on a knee-jerk scramble to raise the tabernacle as the shadow event was occurring. Hey, everyone, look at that shadow. It's going, oh, no, it's going the other direction. Oh, no, no, no. No, he was not scrambling. He had a light season of preparation. This shadow is oriented from east to west, and you're going to see that coming up. I'm going to illustrate that to you. Yahuah is all about preparation. Moshe prepared the foundation according to the Teshuvah shadow or the equinox shadow. On that next cycle, the Shabbat, Moshe was fully prepared and he acted with precision on the plans made the previous cycle on the Teshuvah, on the day of equinox. Let's read Exodus 40, verse 2. On the first day of the first month, you are to raise up the dwelling place of the tent of meeting. Exodus 40, verse 16. And Moshe did according to all that Yahuwah had commanded him, so he did. And it came to be in the first month of the second year, on the first day of the month, that the dwelling place was raised up. And I ask you, how does the shadow of Teshuvah facilitate forming a foundation? How can a shadow do anything? Let me back up a minute before we go there. Do we remember Hezekiah? Hezekiah was sick. He was given 15 more years of life by Yahuwah, and he had some doubt in his mind. Yahuwah, how do I know this? How do I know that your promise to me is going to be fulfilled? He was doubting. He wanted evidence. If you remember, Yahuwah gave him an option. He said, Hezekiah, do you want the shadow on the sundial to go forward, or do you want the shadow on the sundial to go back? Do you notice where the authority was applied? Hezekiah, do you want the shadow to move? This is the shadow that we're talking about. When that shadow was moved back 10 degrees, that's the point where the 360-day year went to 365. That is the authority that Yahuwah applied to that shadow. The shadow itself didn't do it, of course, but Yahuwah applied that amount of authority to the shadow. Now we ask you, Yahuwah does not change his pattern. When we go back to a 360-day year so that prophecy can be fulfilled, what do you think it will be that will cause that? How are we going to understand when it takes place? Are you watching the shadow of Teshuvah? Are you staking out the shadow on the day of the equinox? Just a thought. Let's go to the next page. I told you I'm going to illustrate this. And I want to thank somebody in Covenant Calendar that sent us this picture for marking the shadow. Charlene had arranged a great organization to mark the shadow. This is one of the pictures we got of it. Now, let me explain to you, for those that are not familiar with this. I'm going to read the words first, and then we're going to go to the picture. The multiple stakes are the points marked at the end of the gnomon's shadow at various points and times throughout the light season. You'll see this sign here. I hope you can see my cursor. This is the gnomon. That's the name given to this stake in the ground. Just a stake or a stick or a staff. Or a staff? What about all our patriarchs that carried this staff in their hand? Interesting thought. Anyhow, this is a gnomon. When the sun hits this gnomon, follow my cursor, you're going to see this black shadow on the ground. This is the shadow of Teshuvah. This shadow moves as the sun moves. Now, I want you to go up here to the top. Just a minute. When you see this stake here, when the sun hits it in the morning, that shadow is going to be traced opposite the direction of the sun, because it's a shadow. So that shadow in the morning, you see my cursor here, it's going to be at the west. It's going to start early in the morning. You need to get your very first reading. The very moment you can trace that shadow, you will put one of these stakes in the ground. You will mark the very tip, the very end of that shadow. And then as that shadow moves, you go to put another stake. And it moves, you go to put another stake. And it moves, you go to put another stake. And you're going to continue this throughout the day. And at the end of the day, in the evening, that shadow is going to end in the east. Why? Because it travels the opposite direction of the sun. It's a shadow, it goes from west to east, because the sun rises due east and travels west. It's an opposite effect. Kind of interesting when you see it. But the point is here, as this shadow right here on the ground moves, you can see this stake here. It's staked right at the end of the shadow, at the end of that arrow. I thank the person for this picture. As this shadow moves, you put your stakes in. Now, this line here, this orange line, I put this here so you can mark out, you will see this is a straight line. This is a straight line shadow on the day of Teshuvah. It marks out the format of the sun going across the sky on Teshuvah. On this day only, and yes, it does happen 2 times a year, on this day only, you will get a straight shadow. You will, on the day before, you will see a curve in the shadow. On the day after, you will see another curve in the shadow. This is according to stakes in the ground. In Hezekiah's time, one of the various types of sundial was steps. It had steps. Each step like a stairs. Each step was a certain set of degrees. Some of them were 1 degree, some of them were 10 degrees. Most of them were 10 degrees. I think that I could be wrong on that, but they were set on degrees. So the shadow moved in degrees up these steps. What about that song in Psalms? The song of ascent. Could that be something to do with the shadow? Yahuah's calendar, the song of ascent up these steps that determine time, that determine the calendar of Yahuah. Just a thought. Moving on. Now, the earliest marking is very important. You see this, this, let me go. Okay, yes, this is the west. This blue arrow signifies the area for your first marking. This blue arrow signifies the center the central mark. And I'm going to read this green box on the right. The earliest, central, and latest points are the most critical measurements. Once the sun achieves its zenith, that's the highest point, and no, it's not 12 o'clock. This measurement needs to be marked accurately. It is from this point that will determine the day of the equinox. If it's arced or angled away, it's an arc actually. If it moves away from this point, then it's not the day of the equinox. And I'm going to show you in an illustration coming up. You're going to be looking for this straight line in the illustration coming up. This is marking the shadow of Teshuvah, or marking the shadow of equinox. This is what you're going to see on the last day of the year, of Yahuah's year, whether it's 365 or 360, as in the days of Mosheh. But it will be about 365 presently today as I'm talking to you. This is going to go back to 360 days. So prophecy can be fulfilled. This is the importance of watching this shadow. And there's a lot more to be said on that, but we're going to leave it at that. Now, let's look at another illustration. What about James 1, verse 17? I want you to remember James was the brother, half-brother of Yahushua. He was one of the brothers that doubted. They were chiding Yahushua, go up to this feast. Yahushua said no. He says, your feast is or your time is always ready. It's variable. You change it. You change the dates, change the feasts, you change the times, you go by the sliver moon, you adjust it by the sunset. Your time is always ready. But my time is not yet. So through this, we realize that Yaakov, his actual name in Hebrew, James, he was on a lunar-based calendar before the crucifixion. After the crucifixion is the time when Yaakov, or James, wrote this book. So I want you to notice here, what authority does James show us on calendar? Let's read it. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variableness, no intercalation. Yahuah, you are an Elohim of perfection. You are perfect. You do not need man to intercalate your calendar. It is not faulty. It is perfect. So why do men use intercalation? Because they have a calendar that's not from covenant. It's not from scripture, and it's not from Yahuah, with whom there is no variableness, no intercalation. That's just one way of understanding it. And he continues, neither shadow of turning. How come he didn't say, or how come he didn't pinpoint to a sliver of the moon or a phase of the moon? No, he said, he's pointing out the time frame, the calendar of Yahuah, and he says neither shadow of turning. Weren't we just talking about a shadow? What is this turning word? Well, the word is trope. It's used once in the New Testament, the Messianic Testament. I like that better. Trope, the word identifies the celestial bodies in the atmosphere, in the sky, in the heavens, the celestial bodies when they have completed their circuit and they embark on the first day of the next circuit. Trope, a shadow of turning. Right now, you can understand that Yaakov, the half-brother of Yahushua, has understood after the crucifixion that Yahushua witnessed against the lunar calendar of the Yahudim, and that his calendar is the calendar of the blood-ratified Melchizedek covenant from Mount Sinai. He's telling you that there's no shadow of turning. What is this turning point? He's referencing to a straight shadow of the equinox. We go to the Teshuvah, and we reference the word sign in Genesis 1:4. These lights were to be for sign. This shadow is a light. It's a lesser degree of light, but it is a sign. Now, I want you to notice this yellow box, or it's not a box, I don't know what shape it's in, but anyhow, it's pointing to the east. East is over here, and it's pointing to the west. On the day of Teshuvah, on the equinox, the sun rises due east. It takes a very straight, direct line and settles due west. It does not deviate from that path. It does not arc. That is the peculiarity. Is that a word? That is how peculiar this day is. There's only two of them in the year. There's the vernal one in the spring and the autumnal in the late fall, or the early fall, I should say. West is where the sun settles. So now we're going to look at the shadow of Teshuvah, and I want you to pay attention. Here is your gnomon. Remember that stick that I pointed out in the ground? Well, this is just a black line, but this serves the purpose. It's a vertical gnomon that the sun is going to hit, and it's going to cast the shadow. I hope you have a good imagination. Here is the shadow arc before Teshuvah. I want you to notice. Let's do it again. Back it up. The shadow is going to start in the west in the morning at Boker. Here it goes. It travels through the day, and it has a little bit of an arc. You notice the ends have a little bit of an arc. Very, very important. This arc. What did he say up here? What did Yaakov say? Neither shadow of turning. Well, this shadow turned. It has an arc. What about the next day? I want you to notice where it starts. The shadow is going to start again in the west at Boker at morning. Watch for it. Here it goes. It is the straight line shadow. It is following the path of the sun across the sky. It settles due east. It forms a straight line. It does not deviate. This is equinox. This is Teshuvah. It is the 360th day of the year in the time of Mosheh. It is the 365th day of Yahuah's year today as we speak. What about the next shadow? The day after. Did you notice? It started the same point over here, just a little bit farther away. It has an arc. It deviates from that straight line. This is how you will mark out the day after the Teshuvah, after the equinox. This is written in Scripture. You might say this one example does not prove anything because some say the Scripture demands 2 or 3 witnesses at the least. Be certain that there are multiple Tequfah and Teshuvah witnesses in Scripture. Meanwhile, let's continue our search to see what else happens in the second year. Whoops, pressed the wrong button. Hang on, I'm going to back up. I want to back up here. Let's back up. Let's back up. See this pink line? This is a witness to the sun rising in the east and settling in the west. This is the witness that Mosheh used to align the wilderness tabernacle east and west so that it was an exact alignment with the Mazzaroth. You saw earlier this morning with Robert Williams how that Mazzaroth speaks about the Hebrew nation and the history of that nation. When they were in the wilderness, they were guided by this Mazzaroth. It was a compass. This is how that wilderness tabernacle was oriented. That is why Mosheh had to wait until preparation day all light season, so that he had the east-west location accurately according to the Mazzaroth, according to the heavens. Do you remember in Ezekiel? In Ezekiel, he was taken into the tabernacle in vision, and he witnessed an abomination. The men were in the door of the tabernacle, and they were facing the sun. This is the day of Tequfah, or the day of Teshuvah. They had their faces to the sun. They were in the door of the tabernacle, the door being symbolic of Yahusha. They put their backs to this shadow of Teku, or a shadow of Teshuvah. They rejected this shadow on the day of equinox, and they looked to the sun. They were worshiping a created object. But Mosheh used this fuchsia-colored line, if you will, the shadow, so that he could orient this wilderness tabernacle with absolute perfection. And when you listen to those words in Scripture, when you read them, you're coming in and you're going out. The sun comes in on the east and it goes out on the west. It's just another area of understanding those words and how it applies to calendar, to Yahuah's calendar, none other. Okay, let's move on here. We already read this. We're going to move on. Now, we're going to move into a little bit different section here. And I hope you guys are able to deal with me for a little bit longer. We have some more important material here. We have highlighted one sledgehammer effect to the lunar Shabbat calendar. We've done that already, slides 18 and 19. Would it be interesting to you to view another sledgehammer real soon? What does a sledgehammer do? Well, put a watermelon on a piece of wood, take a sledgehammer to it. That's the effect I'm talking about. What about the lunar calendar? So I want you to witness, we've carried over this second year. You can see the box up here. It has second year. It's month number 1. And we've started on the 9th day of the month so that I can have a full chart here. So let's count the days. This is the 9th day. We're counting to the 14th of the month. It's Passover. It's the 6th cycle of the week. 6th cycle of the week? How can that be? Zadok says that every Passover must be on the 3rd cycle of the week. What about that, Zadok? Scripture has Passover here on a 6th cycle of the week. My question to you, what does that do to the Zadok calendar? This is not just one instance. This is many, multiple, where the Zadok calendar does not agree with Scripture. It is totally foreign to the covenant. Let me say that with emphasis. Let's continue. On this second year in the wilderness, according to Yahuah's count, Unleavened Bread Festival comes on the 15th of the month. You can read that in Leviticus 23. So starting here to the 21st is the Festival of Unleavened Bread. I want you to note what dates of the month the 7th day's Shabbat is in. Go over to the right or left. See, 7th day's Shabbat on the week, 7th day's Shabbat. So it's the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th of this first month of the second year in the wilderness. These are Shabbats. Now, let me read. Let me exclaim on the right. Look, Shabbat on the 15th, 22nd, and the 29th. This is exactly as the lunar Shabbat calendar requires. Can we expect the same fixed Moedim next month as the lunar Shabbat requirement demands? Remember, Yahuah said he does not change. So can we expect this exact same situation next month? Yahuah said, I shall not change. Will Yahuah's pattern change with the Shabbat next month. So look for the Shabbats, where they land on this next slide. Coming up, here we are. It's the second month. The Shabbat is now on the sixth cycle of the month. I want you to look on the right. Do you find the sixth here? How about the next Shabbat in this second month in the wilderness? It's the 13th day of the month. Do you find the lunar requirement 13th over here? No. Their requirements are Shabbats on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. This does not change according to them. Well, they can have their calendar if they want. We just need to understand it is not scriptural. It is opposed to that which is written. It is opposed to the witness of Mosheh in the wilderness, the second year. Is it possible that the fixed lunar Shabbat requirement did not originate from Yahuah? I say, count on it. That's not my opinion. That is from, I don't know how many hours of proof, of proving the witness in the Torah, putting these dates and times and commands to charts, making sure every statute is fulfilled completely, upheld perfectly according to Scripture. And the lunar Shabbat calendar has no place in Scripture. Here's a picture of the conjunctions of the moon. I want you to look in the top right. Here's the 27th. Go ahead, count them. Start over here. Count them all. Moving forward with a lunar look from a Numbers 10 study about Yahuah's cloud. Count these conjunctions and ask yourself, where are the sequential 28 to 29.5 moon phases? We were taught on the lunar calendars that have the Metonic month that there's a 29.5 cycle. Well, there is, according to man. That's what man declares. What about Yahuah? What do you see in the sky? When you read Ecclesiastes 1:5, you will understand that a completed cycle is from point of departure to returning back to point of departure. Sorry. What is it that the 29.5 moon phase month, the Metonic cycle, what does it do? It returns back to the point of departure, and it must go 2 days beyond that point. It sets aside, it destroys, it sidelines Yahuah's paradigm and says, Yahuah, your month is not good enough for us. We're going to declare a lunar month. Is that acceptable to you? Do you mind setting aside Yahuah's declarations and his examples? Is that acceptable? Let's go to Numbers 10. We're going to look at Yahuah's cloud with the lunar calendar. What about Numbers? The function of the cloud, let's read it right here. Numbers 9, verse 19. Even when the cloud lingered many days above the dwelling place, the children of Israel guarded the charge of Yahuah and did not depart. And so it was. When the cloud was above the dwelling place a few days, according to the command of Yahuah, they camped. And according to the command of Yahuah, they would depart. And so it was. When the cloud dwelt only from evening until morning, when the cloud was taken up in the morning, then they departed. Whether by day or by night, whenever the cloud was taken up, they departed. Let's go to Numbers with our view of the moon, the back of our minds. The Shabbat of Yahuah. The Shabbat of Yahuah requires a rest from our servile work processes. We have just learned that on Yahuah's Shabbat, we can perform the work of righteousness as Yahuah so commanded us. The question is, did Yahuah also have the Israelite nation travel on the Shabbat? looking for a resting place? What about this 3-cycle journey as recorded in Numbers? This is the first time they moved. This is a practice. Come on, Hebrew nation, can you pack up this mobile tabernacle and move in order according to my command? Let's see it. Numbers 10, verse 33. So they set out from the mountain of Yahuah on a journey of 3 days. A journey of 3 days. Note this. And the ark of the covenant of Yahuah went before them for the journey, for the 3 days journey, to seek out a resting place for them. Will this very specific 3-cycle journey, will it support the lunar Shabbat calendar? Or will the lunar system again be exposed as a false doctrine? Back to the calendar of the covenant. And before we continue, I give you a reminder. The lunar Shabbat calendar demands their Sabbaths on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th of their lunar phase calculated months. So let's read the command. Numbers 10, verse 11. And it came to be on the 20th day of the 2nd month, in the 2nd year, that the cloud was taken up from above the dwelling place of the witness. The 2nd month, and it was the 20th day. There you have it marked. So the cloud was raised up on the 20th. It's the 7th-day Sabbath. Looking here, here is the 3 days of travel. 21st, 22nd, 23rd. Why is the 22nd highlighted? Why do I have this marked? Let's look. The 3 cycles of travel included the 21st, the 22nd, and 23rd cycles of the month. They were already in a resting place, and Yahuah wanted them to find another resting place. This was an exercise in obedience. So I ask you, would Yahuah then have them travel on the 7th-day Shabbat looking for a resting place when they already had one? Would that be an exercise in futility? Is there anywhere in the scripture where you can find that Yahuah commanded the nation to travel on a 7th-day Sabbath? We just learned about when they crossed the Red Sea the next morning at dawn, the 7th-day Sabbath, they were resting. So here I ask you, is it possible that the 22nd of this month was not Yahuah's Shabbat? Or would he break his pattern? Would he command the children to pack up their goods, pack up their camp, and travel? It wasn't just the tabernacle. That was okay to be raised on the 7th-day Sabbath. But what about all their personal belongings? Would he do that on the 7th-day Sabbath? I say this is not a fixed Shabbat as the lunar calendar requires. It's not according to Yahuah. It was a normal day of the week. And this is what we see by the numbering of the calendar right from when Mosheh was commanded to meet Pharaoh on the Nile. The documentation, all these numbers, the weekly count, 1 to 7, the monthly count, 1 to 30, the cycles of the year, 1 to 360, the Omer count that worked out perfectly to Mount Sinai. These are all witnesses to you that this 22nd day of the month was not a 7th-day Sabbath, as the lunar calendar, or one of the lunar calendars, require. What does this do to that system? What impact, and yeah, I'm having a little fun with words, what impact does this have on the lunar Shabbat calendar? Think about that carefully. The first cycle of the 2nd year was a Shabbat. The command was to raise up the dwelling place of Yahuah. Thus they carried out the command of righteousness. Here, in the wilderness, the cloud lifted, and the nation of Israel had to pack up their belongings, burden their pack animals. Remember, you're not supposed to burden an animal in the 7th-day Sabbath either, and packed up the tent of appointment. Women, children, and men had to walk 3 days with their personal burdens and move their livestock to find another resting place from the one they already had. Was moving their personal residences an act of righteousness on the 22nd on a supposed lunar Shabbat? Where do we find a written example of the Hebrew nation traveling on a Shabbat? Everyone, this is the end of the study. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've been blessed. And I ask you to please enjoy this full study at some point. The Clouds Command of a 3-day journey, it goes a little bit deeper into this study. It has a lot of good details. And this is the end of the study. If you have any questions, please send them to study the calendar or questions at studythecalendar.com. You'll see their websites are down there too, where our studies are all free for you. Free to download, free to examine, free to discuss, and free to challenge us with your questions. Please do. We appreciate it. And we appreciate the time that you have given us tonight to show you what we have studied. I say, don't let tradition box you in. May Yahuah bless you greatly with wisdom, peace, and courage. Shalom. And yes, there is the questions at studythecalendar.com. Thank you, everybody. This is the end. It's good to take a breath. Brad, can you stop the recording?
Yep.
Thank
I'm
you.
getting at it.
Excellent. Thank you, Brad.